This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
I am here today with Aradia and Metal Datura, who are joining me for Chapter 41, A Threat, and the symbol is the lion symbol. And Metal Datura, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? This is your first time on Lot Spoiler. Tell us everything about yourself, and I'll probably re-intro for the chapter.
Okay. Well, my name is Charlyn Green, and I am co-host of the podcast Unramblings, which is about stories and storytelling. I'm currently also accompanied by my cat Shadow, who's decided to sit right against the microphone, so you might hear him purring. But yeah, I'm excited to join. I've been occasionally joining live recordings to listen for a while now, and yeah, this is pretty exciting.
How did you find the Wheel of Time books, and then how did you find the podcast?
Oh, so my journey with the actual series is a little weird because I read the second book first. My dad gave it to me when I was like 10 or 11, and I couldn't get into it, and I put it away, and then I picked it up again when I was 12 and like devoured it and immediately hunted out the rest of them. And I maintain that it's actually easier to get into the series with the second book because you don't actually miss a ton from the first one because there is a pretty good amount of recap, and it starts off a lot more quickly. So at least when you're 12 and your attention span's shorter, I think it actually worked really well to go back and get the details filled in of the first book.
I can see that.
Yeah, I could see the first book as a bit of a prologue.
Yeah. And so I started reading them then in like middle school, high school, and so it was kind of following it on as they were released. My dad reads them as well, or read them as well. He's still alive and stuff. Like but they're done. The books are done. I'm being super weird. Anyway, so my dad introduced them to me, and I first started listening to your podcast in early 2018 because I binge watched it while we were painting our house. And so I remember that.
Nice.
And like it was a great way to catch up on everything because I was just listening to it for literally like full days at a time.
Yeah, that'll do it. The binge is real, definitely, at this point. So, really important question. Mm-hmm. What color was the house? Oh,
well, most of the walls are sort of a cream color, but the bedrooms are light purple, and some of the accent walls are red. In
nice.
Cream rooms. Well, they're cream rooms with a red accent wall, and then...
Oh, I love accent walls.
Like a bluish purple bedroom, and...
Oh boy, eggshell white. A lot of eggshell white in my days.
Yeah. For sure.
When we first moved into this house, it had this like really disgusting like brownish green color all over the walls that like just must have been on sale or something. Like, you know, camo print. It's like if you mixed all those colors together.
I have a room that color in my new house.
It's so gross. Our garage is still that color because we haven't gotten around to it, but it was just so disgusting, and we were just like, no, we can't do this.
And now you will permanently have painting and Wheel of Time, like, inextricably wound together.
I do, yeah. I definitely, like, that is what comes to mind when I think of that period of time, is, like, standing in the room where we ripped out all the carpet, and it's just concrete and painting and listening to the What Spoilers podcast. Good times.
So, yeah, super happy to have you. Super happy to have someone else. You've been podcasting for a while, so that's always when someone's sitting with a microphone. The establishment chapter for Min and Rand's relationship. Actual relationship.
Yeah, it really is.
This is when Min rejoins Rand since she last saw him in The Dragon Reborn, right? When the party split from the mountains.
Yeah.
Right.
She left, has had all these adventures, and is now finally getting to rejoin Rand. And this is where many of us who are absolute fangirls of Min just sort of choose to blank out some of her actions starting at this point. And we rejoin her plot arc later because she gets weird starting in this chapter. This is also, we see Sulin meeting her toe to the maidens. Yeah, we get to look at the Saladar embassy sort of getting established as the alternative to the Tower embassy. And we also get introduced to the fact that Melane's going to have twins, which is a fun, like, sexitary plot to everything else that happens in the series. But they get introduced.
Get it? Sexitary?
Oh,
How else do you think she had twins already? It wasn't
Immaculate conception.
immaculate. Thank you. It wasn't immaculate.
No, it was sexitarian for sure.
It was sextarian.
Oi!
Not immaculatarian. Yeah.
Oy. Yes, indeed.
Riding slowly through Camelin under a baking mid-morning sun, Min really saw little of the city. She hardly noticed the people and sedan chairs, wagons and coaches that clogged the streets, except to guide her bay mare around them. One of her dreams had always been in a great city and travel to strange places. But today, colorful towers covered in tiles and sweeping vistas as the streets rounded it passed all but unseen. Clumps of Aiel, striding through the crowds with space opening around them, got a second glance, and so did patrols of hawk-nosed, often bearded men on horseback, but only because they reminded her of the stories had begun here while still in Murin. Morana had been angered by those, and by the charred evidence of Dragonsworn that they had come on twice. But Min thought some of the other Aes Sedai were worried. The less said about what they thought of Ram's amnesty, the better. At the edge of the plaza in front of the royal palace, she drew Wild Rose's rein and blotted her face carefully with a lace-edged handkerchief that she tucked back up her coat sleeve. Only a few people dotted the great oval, perhaps because Aiel guarded the open main gates of the palace. More Aiel stood on marble balconies or glided across high, colonnaded walks like birds. The white line of Andor stirred in the breeze of the tallest of the palace dome. Another crimson flag from one of the spires, a little lower than the white dome, lifted just enough by the breeze to make out the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai, black and white.
Feels like the beginning of a book, the sort of vista sweeping, character establishing kind of overview.
Really seeing the city through Min's eyes, really seeing Camelin through her, coming in and looking at it, even though she's not looking at it because she's really distracted and really just thinking about Rand right now.
Right, but this is the capital city of her nation that she's never visited, right? So it still has to have that bustling establishment shot cityscape vibe, even if she's pretty much completely not paying attention to it. It's still what's happening.
We get a little bit of backstory. Basically, she traveled with the Aes Sedai from Saladar. They're staying at the inn, and she snuck away before sunrise.
Yeah, I love how she refused their offer of an escort by sneaking away before they could force it. It's like, okay, Min, you spent time with Aes Sedai.
Voted with her feet.
Yes.
It's really the only way is just not give the Aes Sedai a chance.
Mm-hmm. Better to ask forgiveness.
Not our choice. Absolutely.
Right,
yeah.
right. She has a lot of room to ask for forgiveness in that regard. They're not going to do anything to her for that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the Aes Sedai, why do they let her just sort of come and go as she wills? Why do they include her in their...
Well, they're watching her. Like, they know that she's in love with Rand, don't they?
No.
Pretty quickly. Like, soon, don't they know that later?
And they also, I know for a fact they don't know about her viewings.
No, they don't know about her viewings, but maybe it's a bit later, but I remember there's a part where they're like, essentially, she thinks they don't know that she is loyal to Rand, but they do know that she's loyal to Rand. And they might just figure it out in a little while.
Yeah, I don't think they know, but it does become pretty difficult to escape that conclusion pretty quick.
Yeah.
Something to do with Swan, right? Because Swan knew. So she did something involving her political machinations to make sure Min was included and respected, but I'm not thinking of why or how.
It seems to mainly be because she knew Rand before, because they keep grilling her about, like, how do we approach him without pissing him off or making him feel nervous? And so they know that she has that connection to him because she traveled with him before.
Oh, right. Those months in the mountains with Moraine.
Yeah, because that's what she tells Rand is, like, they keep asking me about this. They clearly do not want to scare you. They clearly don't want to offend you, because otherwise they wouldn't all have come to me about that.
Right. And some of them knew that she was Elmendretta, which means there's a lot of, like, oh, so she's been around. She's a known friend of friends of Rand. And Swan definitely dropped all of the breadcrumbs to make sure that impression was shored up.
Yeah.
And don't forget, she showed up with Logain.
And then there was that whole everything. She's a really unique ace up the sleeve. Even if they don't quite know what her capacity is, they know she's a unique player.
Yeah, Min is one of the most curious characters. He's there so often, just looking, watching.
And she's so
Seeing.
perceptive. Like, even beyond her ability, she really does seem to just see the reality of people and who they are too. That's a big part of why she and Rand get along the way they do.
I see you, Rand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely highlighted that later in the chapter.
For sure. That's one of the many reasons why she's one of my favorite characters in the entire series, and I kind of want to, aggressively attack people who have less than complimentary things to say about her. She just is there.
Sexy lamp.
Yeah, I do not subscribe to the sexy lamp, and I will grab the nearest lamp and make my opinions known violently.
Yeah, I think
Min
a big part
is
of
so smart and so, like you said, she's just there. She's just observing and being and somehow keeping up despite not having any magic powers or a fancy education or a title or anything. She just keeps up for the whole freaking series.
Well, I think she's also happy to let people overlook her or assume they know why she's somewhere. That she's happy to let people think she's just there as Rand's bed warmer, and she knows and he knows that she's a lot more than that, and she doesn't care about what they think.
Yeah, she doesn't need to be seen as the smartest, most important emotional anchor in Rand's world because she is, regardless.
So what you're saying is they're hiding a gun inside the sexy lamp?
I would be okay with that interpretation. More like, a balefire terangrial, but, sure.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't have anything to prove is really what it comes down to, unlike so many of the other characters whose points of view we get, who do have some point to prove or a chip on their shoulder in some way.
Yeah, and that's what makes her so frustrating in this particular portion of her story, is because suddenly she does have something to prove and she does care what other people think, and it completely warps her story and makes her not as interesting.
In some ways, I kind of appreciate a little bit of that because she is essentially like she's not understood how other people can get kind of twisted up and seem so different when they fall in love, but then she has to realize that sometimes your emotions are overwhelming and do kind of push you in more unreasonable directions. And I don't know, I think it's kind of a point of empathy because she's like, I'm starting to understand all these people that I've been passively passing judgment on my whole life.
That's fair. Her internalized misogyny does definitely get some hard knocks when she goes through this.
And if there's anything Jordan loves to do to his characters is to make them critical. And so for her to be like, I will never let a man affect my behavior, and then obviously have her affection for Rand and her uncertainty that he returns that affection completely affect the way she's acting.
Yeah.
Kind of makes me think about how Rand lets himself be driven by the need to not be controlled by the Aes Sedai. So they actually totally share that.
Yeah, she's trying to exert control over something that she knows she has to do. So like she knew she would fall in love with him and that she would be kind of powerless to do anything about those feelings. And so in this, she's trying to wrest some control over how that plays out. And it's silly and it rests entirely on a fundamental lack of communication, but I mean, that's the whole series, so...
Which is so fair.
Yeah. Well, and I would argue it's the first half of the series, and the whole point is that what Jordan loves to show is that men and women not communicating causes all sorts of bad issues, and then in the second half, when they do start working together, better things
come
happen.
together. One thing I want to point out about like this earlier part where they're kind of talking about her backstory and things like that, like I have to bring this up every time Min comes up because I feel really strongly about this, and I don't want to talk about the show too much, but I really hope that they stick to Min being gender nonconforming in the show and develop her maybe as more explicitly non-binary, because I think it would work really awesomely with like her undercover arcs and her discomfort with having to play those more traditionally feminine roles, and it would work really well with the later parts of her development in public and being a public figure with like inspiring these like androgynous standy fashions and challenging gender norms in a lot of ways. And I think that I would love to see that not just influencing women's fashion, but influencing everyone's fashion. I just really love the potential there for that kind of representation.
I'm nodding.
It's not what I would assume based on the actress.
I'm still nodding. Yeah, well, you can still be gender nonconforming and non-binary and look extremely feminine.
Yes,
So
you definitely
there's
100% can.
a lot of room for the show to continue to follow that angle and impress us, despite the initial flavor of the casting and the Instagram posts of said actress, which I'm not complaining about, but they're not very non-binary.
Fingers crossed that there is at least some adherence to these ideas. Maybe pushing
I love
that.
your idea of her also influencing male fashion as well, when she gets into that like Lady Taviran thing with the short coats and the high boots. I would love it if she ended up influencing both genders' fashion, because that would be a great way for that.
Just a little bit of lace.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Some heels, make that butt pop.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, men wore heels in, for much of history. That is not.
And it's a shame that they don't anymore, frankly.
Yeah.
Well, some of them, anyhow.
I mean, honestly, her clothing isn't. I mean, it's described not that dissimilarly from some of the tighter clothes Matt wears at different points in the series. So.
And it's the most modern clothing is what he's sort of describing a pantsuit, with heels, right? Like, her clothes are very, very radical for the time, and she certainly does influence fashion for many of the countries, and makes sort of what I would consider more modern female dress.
Yes, it's very 90s modern. It's an interesting backstory that she has, honestly, given the whole, like I don't get her backstory and where she got the idea to be so self-confident in this apparently utterly unique gender non-conforming approach to fashion that holds up even when she gets involved in higher politics, but not her aunts. There's this whole comment here about how they tried to stuff her into dresses and then gave up because it wasn't working. So they were not reinforcing this until she gave them some kind of 11-year-old ultimatum or something.
Yeah, well, she'd been in the mines for 10 years, so.
There's no mention of her mother, and then it's only after her father died that her aunts tried to take over, but at that point she was too much of a tomboy, so, like, her father was apparently super okay with, like, that, which just doesn't strike me as consistent with every other patriarchal figure that we've seen in the backcountry.
Yeah, every once in a while you get a dad who's just like, hey, I'm going to work and I wish you were a boy, so here's your jeans and your overalls. Like that whole like I'm going to treat you like a boy growing up thing is not uncommon necessarily, especially when there's only one child. With
mining and that kind of work that kids are put to, though, I don't think that was always separated along gender lines. If you were small, you could go in the mines. And so I think her father was probably a miner and her mother was probably dead. And where is he going to be able to have her where she can also be making a living? Like, he's got her in the mines like any other kid in that community.
And then there's that one time she wore a dress at the tavern. That one and only time she willingly put on a dress. And that doesn't sound like a good time, frankly.
Yeah. And she's even got a line farther down about how she kicks this internal thought as hard as she'd ever kicked any stableman who tried to cut rough, which I'm assuming means gets way too gropey. And it's just like, yeah, she went through a really interesting rough and tumble life, I think. And I'm very confused where her personality grows out of that backstory.
Stubborn freaking will, I think. Like, there's some of that stubborn Two Rivers-ness still got to her in Barrelon, and just like her life wasn't great, and she was like, no, I'm gonna live it the way I'm gonna live. Y'all are gonna deal.
Yeah.
Also, I love cutting rough as a
euphemism
analogy for euphemism. Yeah, that's great. I'll have to use that one.
I mean, I can't imagine what else it means. I don't think she'd went around kicking people just for making comments. But like, I don't know. I just feel like a lot of my fashion choices have been more born out of an interest of avoiding a certain appearance than wanting to have a certain appearance. So I don't know. I have a lot of empathy and a lot of confusion with men's fashion choices. And I'm just sitting in that place of contradictory knowing and not knowing, being like, why are you like this? And how can I be more like you?
For me, I see the decoration dance as a very Aiel picking up the spears instead of a sword and being like, I'm not going to wear a dress. And the Aiel like, we're not going to use weapons. But this spear-like thing sure does function a lot like a weapon. And this pants-like thing is sure functioning a lot like a dress for her, It's pretty, it's showing off, it's decorated,
Yeah, I kind of interpret it in some ways as she sort of rejected her feminine identity for a very long time and then realized there were aspects of it that she did want to I guess, own more, but she didn't want to go back totally on the established identity that she had for herself and like the way she thinks of herself, which is so against dresses, and she's just not physically comfortable in them. Like we see the way that she's physically uncomfortable wearing a dress when she's with the Shanchan and when she's hiding out as Onandrada. And so like this is sort of the like, well, I do actually want to be seen in this way as more feminine than I had historically been comfortable being seen, but I can't go all the way that far. I don't want to be conventional like that.
So she goes up to the palace and looks through the crowd of maidens and looks for the shortest one.
Yeah. Oh, and Nyla.
I love that that's her qualification of like, oh, they're all so tall. I'll just talk to the shortest.
It's the least intimidating.
That's the least intimidating. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that's hilarious because Anyla is one of the ones who shaved and beat Isendre for trying to sneak into Rand's bed, which is why the other maidens think it's funny when she's like, if he doesn't know you, you'll leave much faster than you go in.
Is that what that's about?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yes. Yeah. And so like she's like, oh, I'll talk to the shortest one. She's the least intimidating. It's like, no. That's the one who's the first one who's going to hold you down and shave you if you're trying to sneak into Rand's room.
I did not catch that. I love that.
Yeah, there is that moment where they're the very guarded about Min until she sort of becomes a wise one.
Which is in this chapter, but yeah.
Yeah, just that first, like, 5 minutes where she walks in and, like, who's this bitch? Like,
right, because she's
jumping into Rand's arms.
Right, they've had to screen so many from so many different cultures that it's like, what are you?
Right.
Oh, you're just a friend. Cool.
Right. We think.
Yeah.
Right, and then Sulin's like, I have opinions, but I can't have them because I'm Gaishan, and Gaishan don't have opinions.
Oh, Sulin certainly has opinions anyway, don't
I love watching Sulin exploding in the background of these scenes.
Yeah.
Like you picked a poor time to quit being the head of the Maidens of the Spear.
Very.
You notice how Anyla, she gets a viewing of Anyla having a wreath above her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, puts a wreath at Liren's feet. However, she is killed in the last battle. She gets a couple of
Oh.
Yeah. I interpret that as why it only flickers.
Oh.
Right.
It flickers and
So.
is gone because they get engaged, but they don't actually get to get married.
That's what I think anyway.
Oh, I agree, and my heart hurts.
Yeah, it's very sad.
I love that Min's viewings, she doesn't know what they mean because they actually are the specific symbols for what the pattern is seeing, right? Like, it's not a matter of, because it could have been like wedding bells or ribbons or something to make Min understand, but no, it's a wreath, which like it will not make sense unless you are Aiel, right?
So how do you explain when she knows she just...
The pattern needs to mess with her. That's all I got. But I like that the pattern sometimes is like, what matters here is the wreath, not you knowing that they're going to get married, but that a wreath is involved in her future. So I don't know why it matters. I mean, everything about Min's viewings is just pure chaos. She's like a counterbalance to the randomness of the Dark One or something.
Huh, that's an interesting theory.
Quantum good?
Yeah.
Min's uncertainty principle?
I also love in this scene that Min makes a joke that the Aiel appreciate. Like, it tells me that her sense of humor is similar to the Aiel sense of humor. And I think it's in some ways a hint of how quickly they're going to accept her as being sort of like an honorary wise one and like an honorable person to the Aiel.
Agreed. If you can get on the level with the humor, then you're halfway there.
And that dry, sarcastic wit is like the right kind of humor to win over the Aiel.
Yeah.
Next thing I had is, I hadn't really made this connection, but Elaine's throne on a pedestal is very much like when you're in high school or middle school and you have a crush and you put that crush up on a pedestal without actually getting to know them. And you say you're in love and you have all these feelings for the person you imagine, not the person they actually are.
Yeah.
And for me, that sort of putting the throne up on a pedestal is very much like putting Elaine up on this pedestal and sort of emblematic of it in my mind.
I'm nodding so hard.
And part of why she doesn't want to be quote-unquote given the throne is like, no, you can't give me a throne. You can't put me up on this pedestal. You have to get to know me. You can't just give me the relationship. It's just, I'm making a loose analogy to their relationship to the giving of thrones. But specifically is putting the throne up on the pedestal.
I mean, arguably they both put their relationship on that pedestal, and that's part of what makes it so frustrating is they both are worshiping this throne rather than getting to know each other.
But I really like this analogy because everyone else also like totally interprets that placing of the throne up there as this sort of trophy pedestal type of thing and are really mad at him about it. And that, I think, works really well with this idea of other people being really mad at him for not actually thinking through that, like, this is a human being who's got her own right to, being an individual and being in charge in the way that she is.
And of course, it's mostly people from Andor who have that opinion.
Yeah.
People who, the matriarchal dominated society are aware of just, like, how awful that is and how, like, that's not going to work, that sort of...
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that does hold up. It really does.
Because I've been trying to sort of frame the whole, why is Elaine so angry about the throne somewhere? And, like, how... I was trying to figure out, like, why that was such a source of...
It makes it look like a trophy.
It makes her look like an object to be possessed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like a trophy wife, and, like, he's giving her this out of his benevolence because it's his to give, and it's like, no, it's not fucking yours to give.
Yeah. Like, I could be a farm wife, and this is still my house because roof mistress something, but I'm also the queen of fucking Andor, so, like, this is extra rude, my Lord Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's like if I left something at your house and then you wrapped it up and gave it to me for Christmas. I'd be like, what the fuck?
Like, could you just give it back? I'm not going to thank you for this purchase. It's not a purchase.
Oh, so you've gotten gifts from my parents. No, my parents actually were very nice to me this Christmas. I really appreciate everything they gave me. Thank you.
It's worse than regifting because it's giving you your own stuff that somebody took from you, or, like, that you just happened to leave near them and they, like, put it in their pocket and then pretended it was a gift. Like, what are you doing?
It's kind of like when you're a Native American tribe and your artifacts get taken to Britain and you have to pay for the privilege to come observe them in their archival state, even though it was literally made by your great-great-grandmother. Kind of like that.
I think we should redefine Indian giving to mean that.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm just saying, museums and looting the Venn diagram gets disturbingly close to a circle.
Meanwhile, there's a bunch of British and German museum curators going, what?
Well, it's a fact. Sorry, not sorry. But anyway, I feel like Andorran pride very much, yes, explains a lot of this. And why the nobles are in agreement with Elaine, right? Elaine is not just being a spoiled princess. This is literally, like, the respect due the crown of Andor. And I did call it the crown, not the throne, because the Netflix show, obviously.
The next thing that Min sees is Rand and the standard lights going into darkness, but also the yellow and brown and purple aura, which is just the color of bruises.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's the beatings.
The beatings he's going to get, yeah.
That's between the kidnapping and Jemai's Wells, is what all of those colors are for. And it's just like, Min, you don't even realize, but you're going to be there suffering a not dissimilar experience at that time.
No, and this is, as far as I know, the first time that we hear of Min's pain, or the first foreshadowing of him being, like, beaten by Aes Sedai.
Yeah, that women who can channel will hurt him.
And she tells him more about it later, and in a way that's, like, might happen more than once. And I'm not sure whether to interpret that as it being that because the beatings are repeated, or if it's also alluding to Semirhage taking him and hurting him, or if it's just about the Tower Aes Sedai.
I always figured it was the fact that the beatings are both one event and many events.
Oh, and the other thing was also if they had turned him over to Savannah and the Shido-wise ones, then that could also be the, like, more than once that was possible, but not guaranteed. It reminds me of the viewings she has in the tower before the, like, about the Shanshan attack that no one believes.
The way where it's kind of all mixed in with, at least the way I interpret it, it's all mixed in with viewings about the day of the coup.
Yeah.
So there's, like, some of the viewings are about the coup and some of them are about the Shanshan attack, which is, 8 months later or something.
Yeah, and it's very murky. Like, she just knows, like, a whole lot of things are going to be really bad for a lot of these women.
Yeah, the temporal inaccuracy in her viewings make it really hard necessarily. Like, the never knowing when is the one really thing that keeps her viewings from being, like, OP.
Yeah, the temporal ambiguity, it does a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, and also probably helps preserve her insanity.
Sure.
Or preserve her sanity, keep her from insanity. Because if you knew things to too much precision, right? The wise ones say, like, you would be like an animal or insane.
Yeah. It's why the memories fade from the rings, right?
Yeah, you can't know too much. Your brain will not handle it.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the theme of Dune. Right?
Yeah.
He perfectly predicts the future and is trapped on a path that he can't change because he's already seen his entire future, and he has to reenact every syllable, every interaction already seen ahead of time.
Yeah, I'm currently about halfway through Dune Messiah. I'm reading it out loud to my warder, and yeah, the temporal non-ambiguity is definitely a driving force of that plot. Yeah, and just the way that Paul and Alia interact with Spice and the enemies, and I'm having a hard time with the books. I spend most of my time criticizing why it doesn't make sense, but yes. I want to point out that she doesn't see anything in the nobles facing him because all of them are straightforward Andoran, non-dark friends just trying to do what they say they're trying to do, and there's nothing useful to view about them for that reason.
They're also non-channelers, and she rarely sees anything around channelers.
Right, yeah, they are not going to do anything that would make them viewing worthy because they're just the Andoran nobility.
Mm-hmm. The pattern does not care what they're doing.
No. Min is thinking, like, if I can just find an image that will help me, like, clue Rand into their true intentions, and, like, Rand is fully clued into their true intentions because they're Andoran and they don't do subterfuge.
Not well, anyway. They're starting to.
And none of them are dark friends. They're all, like, actually who they say they are in every sense of the word. Same with the Tower Embassy. None of them are dark friends.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. It's certainly statistically
not the Tower
unlikely.
Embassy, the Saladar Embassy.
The Saladar Embassy. It's statistically unlikely that they'd get 9 with no dark friends, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Like...
Not only is it statistically unlikely, I mean, you wouldn't think Sharon would plant. She certainly had input in who went. Like, it seemed not only statistically, but plot-wise unlikely that Shireen would at least make sure there's one, unless she just doesn't know that many Black sisters. The hearts really do explain a lot of the terrible communication among the Black sisters.
That was my conclusion too, because otherwise someone would have been planted in there.
Yeah, because Shiriam, we never get an impression of her being particularly high in Dark Friend plans. She's not like Alviarin, who's like literally the head of the Black, right?
No, she just happens to be
Leandrin.
Decently positioned once or twice, and so the other Black hierarchy takes advantage of her.
Right. So the Black hierarchy, the Black Aja metamind, made decisions about the embassy and chose not to expend Shiriam's influence on getting a Dark Friend sister into that embassy. Presumably because they had the whole kidnapping Rand with the Tower Embassy thing figured out, and they didn't need to shore up their bets with the Saladar Embassy.
It was also in the gap when, Masima is in the tower, but Arangar...
Masana? Yeah.
Masana is in the tower, and we don't have Halima in Saladar yet. And so...
Oh, yeah,
that might have been a moment when sort of the rebel Black Aja may have been sort of out of communication for a little while, and not like fully in control of the Forsaken, and maybe they weren't to plan out, hey, make sure you put a spy in the embassy.
That makes sense.
And it's also like a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? Like, focus on the plot you've already got established and let those other fools go make a mess on their own power.
And they definitely plotted for the breakup to happen.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you have to contaminate the embassy too, or can you just let it be self-destructive? Dark Friends are lazy.
Yes, we
True.
are. They are. Damn it! I now have to kill you all.
Wait, swear on this oath rod first.
I'll edit that out. It'll be fine. Unless I forget.
So there's this moment where she's all like, oh my god, I'm about to pass out because I'm hyperventilating because he's so cute! And then there's a POV switch. And he's like, oh my god, my bestie is here! And it's this whole really awkward, like, friend zone negotiation situation.
And this is what the thing I was talking about before, where she has to acknowledge. So this was what it felt like for all those women she had laughed at, throwing themselves at a man's feet. And I just appreciate that, because it's easy when you're not in the middle of strong emotions to laugh at or dismiss how strong they are for other people. But we're all human beings. And so, like, this is her having to acknowledge that she's not above that.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is just adorable. Like,
I
he
think
spins
so,
her
too.
around, and she leans against his chest, and he gives her a hug, and they don't really realize they're touching, but they're both kind of... It's just very puppy love. Like, I don't know.
It is,
I
yeah.
read this whole reunion as something that, like, it just makes me go, aww.
Yeah,
Her
it's pretty
eyelashes
adorable.
seemed longer than he remembered. Aww, it's so cute.
Yeah.
And it's that part in the sitcom where you know the characters are going to get together, but they haven't realized it yet. And so you're just, like, kind of watching them circle each other and figure out, like, okay, you're going to get together, but... And then, you know, that's almost often the most, like, tantalizing part of the relationship, right? Like, oftentimes when they actually get together, the writers have to figure out something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I appreciate that Jordan, you know, I like that he does it for a little while, but I also appreciate that he doesn't, like, drag it out for a long time.
Yes. The
Yes.
will they, won't they is kept to a very reasonable amount.
Which is my favorite thing about Min. Like, it's like, the will they, won't they happens, and then they do, and then they just do. And there's no, like,
Yeah.
there's that, like, rom-com thing where they realize something's wrong and they have to break up, and then he does it with the other two, right? He does it with Lane, he does it with Avienda. He doesn't do it with Min.
Which is
Yeah,
so
we've
nice.
done it already, but also like some of it is kind of, I guess, the sweetness, like the saccharine potential, I think is cut through a little by the fact that she knows she's in love with him, and so like there is that dimension of like the audience, us, we already know that they will, you know, because she already knows that they will, and she's a very reliable source of information.
Right. For multiple reasons in this
Yes.
case.
Yeah.
Both the
Exactly.
prophecies and her own emotions.
Yeah, and so it's really just like a brief period where she's just trying to make it feel like she's in control of that in some remote way and like claw back some dignity. And so that's kind of where you get this little bit where she's going to pretend it's a will they, won't they for a minute, just so it feels a little more normal. And then they can get past that.
Don't forget, she knows she will be in love with him. She has no idea if he will be in love with her. And after this rant, it doesn't sound like he is. And so
Yeah.
she realizes she actually has to actively seduce him, or else she's going to be on the wrong side of a really poor power dynamic.
Yeah, she'll be pining, and that'll suck. That's totally true.
She's trying also to leave room for Elaine and to a certain extent Avienda, because she feels like unfairly advantaged with knowing this whole like triple romance thing is happening, and she's trying so hard to like do her part to let Rand like have his own process and like not unduly influence, like, because she hands over Elaine's letter and is like, we are not having our conversation until you have this letter read. Like, we just cannot.
She wants to give him a chance to fall in love with her and not try to manipulate him, which I
agency.
totally respect, because there are so many things where someone knows, like, has an unfair knowledge about another person or something like that, and they misuse it in a way that's manipulative and gross. And she does not do that. She wants to make sure that they can form a connection and he can fall in love with her without knowing that she's fated to love him, which then he might just feel guilty and like he has to pretend to love her, and that she doesn't want that either. So like it's a delicate thing. With the letter, I'm glad you brought that up, because then like that kicks off him describing his feelings for Elaine and Avienda, and then later he's describing his feelings for her, and he's describing different ways of being in love with someone and different characters of a romantic relationship, but he only has labeled his relationships with Avienda and Elaine as romantic, and his takeaway from that seems to be that if something is romantic, that it's going to be tumultuous like that. Like, he just explained the way his love for Elaine and Avienda feel different from each other, then describes here, like in this part where he's like, I feel comfortable with you and all of that. But it's also clearly him being in love with just a different type of love. And it's harder for him to recognize that he's in love with Min, because his love for Elaine and Avienda is dramatic and confusing, not comfortable and comforting, and something that helps him to be more himself. Like, his feelings for Min in that relationship that he does build with her, I think are in a lot of ways the healthiest that we see, and seem like the ones that follow on the most clearly from his relationship with Tam. And I think that makes it even more appropriate that Min's the one that he then introduces to Tam.
I often find the lack of nuance around the many kinds of love to be frustrating in many books and with many characters, but particularly, yeah, like you're saying here with Rand, he thinks of romance as drama and tumultuousness, and it's like, well, first of all, there's many kinds of romance, and then there's so many other kinds of love, like, at all, right? And he doesn't really get that, and nobody in these books really seems to get that much. But Min is the oldest of the quartet, right? Because it goes Min, Rand, Elaine, Avi. I don't know if Elaine or Avi into which one's younger. But Min's the oldest.
They're around the same age, but Min is older than them, yeah.
She has the most perspective on the different kinds of relationships and how relationships can change in age.
Yeah, and she seems to value stability more. I mean, she's mad that she's going to be in love with Rand because he's so young, and she says she prefers older men. She wants someone who's more stable and not going to be all dramatic like this.
Right. And I think it's interesting that Elaine tries to, like, undercut Min slightly in her letter, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Even though, like, knowing what we know about how sister wives, like, come into play, like, in the end, it's not undercutting, but she definitely meant it as undercutting when she wrote it.
Yeah.
I love her like a sister, and I hope you love her like I do, i.e. like a sister, i.e. only bang me, the princess. Don't bang my friend, please.
Yeah, and the bit where her ink must have been running out because the last lines were a hurried scrawl, quite unlike the elegance of the rest. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, like she's just sitting there spacing out, being like, I don't know what to say. Oh crap, I have to send this. Okay, I'll just dash off something real quick.
Yeah, it clearly shows that she's clearly not super on board with the whole sharing thing, but she wants to kind of imply that she's okay with it without actually saying that. There's those Android sensibilities, so she's incapable of being blunt about sexual and romantic relationships.
Yeah, and she's like, please, you turn Min down. Don't make me turn Min down. And then Rand's like, but I love all of you in different ways. And Avienda's like, have you heard of this cool cultural mechanism called not monogamy?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Rand also has this, like, really hilariously innocently kinky line over here where he's like, I don't know whether she, being Elaine, wants me to kiss her or kneel at her feet. Truth to tell, sometimes I did want to kneel and worship. Like, okay, Rand. So that was an awakening that you had, I guess.
Oh, I like this bit where Min goes, did nobody ever tell you it isn't polite to talk to one woman about another? She does this thing where she's speaking for the reader, and this is definitely one of them.
Yeah, like, just in case you think this is cool, it's generally not going to go over super great. And then he friend zones her, and it's really cringy.
Mm-hmm. And I love the stance she takes after this. The description, like, her wrists were twisted so her fingers pointed up, and somehow that made it very different. And that's, like, it's a very interesting, it's more of a come and get it or eat your heart out type pose. Because if you do that, if you have your wrists turned that way, your shoulders go back and your chest is lifted. So, and it reminds me of that mention before that she was a waitress at a rough bar one time. So she knows how to attract men's appreciation if she wants to, like if she wants tips or whatever. And so this is her being like, no, I can be, like, sexy if I want to, and you're going to see that.
I also see that as kind of a sassy, like, challenging posture, too.
Yeah. It's eat your heart out. It's come and get it.
Yeah, I love it, because I remember one time I read this and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And then I tried to imitate the posture and I was like, oh no, that makes sense. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I feel very sassy and like I could just go strutting away in heels right now. Like, it's just added. It's a power pose. It's a total power pose.
These boots were made for walking. Like that is what is happening here.
And Keith makes a good point. Leanne gave her a few tips too, so it's not.
Oh, and Loris.
Exactly what that. Yeah, exactly what that body position and like how to really what that communicates to men. She's very aware of what her body position communicating.
Yeah, I mean, and just because she usually goes the other way with trying to avoid those kinds of positions, like that doesn't mean she doesn't know how to turn it the other way if she wants to.
Exactly. Like you can totally walk around like in this neutral kind of way, and then just by, changing one little thing in how you hold your body, you are suddenly very not neutral. You are now sending like an entire thesis of very specific opinions and invitations.
And so that leads to this, Min, I don't think of you as a woman, which then gives her this, like, entire excuse to just flaunt her body on him and be like, oh, really? Well, what about this ass? Does this ass feel like a woman's ass? What about these boobs? What about this vagina? Does it feel like a woman's vagina?
Does it smell like a woman? It's so funny.
It's amazing.
And he's like, yeah, I guess. I'm and then he's like shifting around uncomfortably, and it's like, yeah, somebody's got a boner.
Like, yes, Min, yes, you have aroused the male response, as women are wont to do. That has happened.
It's amazing and hilarious.
And it's kind of a running joke between them for, like, a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Even after they give up the pretense.
That's why I say it's a running joke rather than a thing she's, like, needling him with. Like, it's actually, like, a little bit of this, like, couple's joke that they can sort of hold on to in, like, their more private moments.
Which is super real, though. Like, that is totally a thing that, you know, you end up carrying over that thing that they're never going to live down.
Mm-hmm.
Your
that
partner.
awkward moment you had when you were, like, trying to seduce the other person, but, like, put your foot in your mouth, and they were like, okay, that was dumb, but I get what you're trying to do.
Yep.
Yes.
It's really
It's amazing.
sweet, even though it's adorably cringy. It's just adorable, also.
For me, their relationship has always been my favorite, and it's stuff like this. It's the cuteness, it's the back and forth that makes it feel more real, more fleshed out than his other two relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we don't really get that with him and Elaine ever.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Well, she's not afraid of him.
No.
You know, she'll just mess with him and tease him. Like, she treats him like a human being.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with Avienda, that it's very culturally different, because they're sort of getting that, but, like, on two different cultural levels, and they never...
Yeah.
I never feel like they fully connect on a human level. There's always that, like, cultural barrier between them that they start to pierce, but I feel like she ends up going away right as they get to that point.
Yeah, I was really sad they didn't get more time together with her being less self-centered and actually a wise one. If they had one great night, and they had obviously lots of good conversations, but it was like, finally, maybe you could have something like with Min, and then it's time for the last battle, so.
Right. Yeah, and this is where, you know, I would appreciate at least 3 more books between book 11 and 12.
Yeah.
It's interesting here how much Robert Jordan is setting us up to wonder at the false equivalency of drama and of successful relationship because of this whole, like, friend zoning conversation where he's like, I can't be in love with you because I'm good friends with you. And, like, as someone who has been married for well over a decade, let me say, if I was not really good friends with my husband, that would not be a thing. Like, friendship is such a critical component of a successful romantic relationship. And the fact that Min is in here showing us that, like, that's how she would approach this romance. And Rand is like, well, that's not a thing. Like, at surface read, it means that RJ doesn't get it. At a deeper read, it means that RJ is smacking you in the face with how much you don't get it.
Right. And I think that's what it is, especially, like, I really do think that he only isn't interpreting his relationship with Min as romantic, potentially, because his interactions with Elaine and Avienda, where he is much more aware is a romantic and sexual thing, is so dramatic, and it's that, like, infatuation stuff. And so without that, he doesn't even recognize that that's what this is, that this is love.
Right.
And I think it's why a lot of people think they are falling out of love, or they're losing the spark in their relationship or whatever, but it's not that. It's just like your brain is slightly less awash in chemicals as it is at the beginning. And that's not necessarily, like, any indication of, like, a failing or a lessening of the relationship. It's just a different phase of the relationship.
But damn, those chemicals feel so good.
They do. They're
They
pretty
do.
great.
Oh, God.
Addictively
man.
good, yes.
Addictively good. Yeah. And that's, you know, and the people who I think of as serial monogamists are people who I think are always chasing that high.
Oh, I totally agree. Yes. Like, they think that if you're not in that first blush infatuation phase, then it's over. And it's like, no, it's not. Doesn't mean it's over. That means you get into the really good part where you really know this person.
Yeah, totally.
When you get to take them down off the pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And actually play with the
Yeah.
twin.
And, and they're more than just novelty and good sex. Like, there's much more coming after that.
Yeah. Oh, shush.
I'm still 5 inside. Well, 13 inside.
Yeah, like 13.
So does Min already know Avienda's the third?
She's just heard her name here, I think.
Seth, we just recorded the episode where Avienda makes it to Saladar, so yeah, at that point, that is when Elaine discovers that Avi is the third. So Min doesn't know. Min knows that the third is dangerous, but she doesn't know who it is because Elaine has only just figured that out like a day ago or the same day.
Right, and they've been traveling for a while because they didn't teleport. They didn't use a gateway, right? Or they did?
Correct, they did not gateway because the
gateway.
technology for gatewaying only arrived with Egwene. Which was like 2 days ago.
Gateways start making timelines weird.
Yes.
In this chapter, Min finds out about Avienda because she says all that about Elaine and this Avienda. Who is she, by the way?
Yeah. So
I was wondering if she was just like fronting that with Rand to be like, oh, she already knew about Avienda, and be like, so who's this Avienda person? You know?
Yeah.
But no, you're right. That information hadn't.
It's the first time she's gotten the name, but she's also like, and now I have a name for the third. And she plays it up as a little bit more of a surprise to Rand because it would, not be good for his mental health to know 3 women are destined to be in love with him.
Right, which is why she's like, it sounds like you love them both.
Yeah.
So Min and Elaine find out about Avienda independently.
At almost exactly the same time.
Almost exactly. Like it's Taviran or something.
Next thing I have is her being mad at Rand for trying to decide how other people are going to interact with him, because
Me too.
that's a fair thing to be mad about.
Yep. I think that's, again, her being the reader of, like, what the hell? What gives you the right to make that choice? Exactly.
Yeah. Like, haven't we gone over this with Lan and Nynaeve already? Like, this is not the right choice.
Yeah, it's exactly what he and Perrin and Lan all struggle to accept. That they do not have that right.
Yeah. Matt is the only one who even begins to understand that women are full and complete human beings perfectly capable of going into danger and making that choice for themselves. And even he struggles with it a lot.
The answer to which one of the boys is actually good with women, it's always Matt.
Yeah.
Because he treats them most like humans.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a hilarious but true statement.
What do you think about the statement when he says, she says, do you love both of those? Like, Light, help me. I think maybe I do. Does that make me a Lecherman or just a...
It's that socialization. He thinks it's inappropriate, that Andoran prudishness.
Yeah, he thinks there's only one person you can love at once.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Jordan, at some point in his life, did date 2 girls at the same time. And so that's sort of the source of Rand having 3 girlfriends. Is if I can have 2, why can't the hero of the universe have 3? But I have to wonder if he's maybe not asking that question about himself.
Mm.
I mean, I think it's a fair question for someone raised in our puritanical, mono everything society.
Yeah.
I think that's a really fair question to have the hero struggle with on behalf of the reader and the author.
And on behalf of the writer.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like, that answer is not the same for everyone in identical appearing situations, right? Some people are greedy fools, and some people are lechers, and some people genuinely have lots of relationships, and it's totally cool. And, it's a valid question to sit with for yourself when you're coming to terms with that and undoing your socialization.
Okay.
This message here where he basically says, he explains his reasoning for getting rid of Elaine and Avienda, basically being like, I love them, I have to get rid of anyone I love.
Mm-hmm.
Is also, I think, part of why she doesn't let him that she loves him right
Mm-hmm.
away.
Yeah.
Is that she has to, like, worm her way in first before... If she can be like, oh, I love you, and if he admits to himself he loves her, he has to send her.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's him still being traumatized by Ravine killing Avienda and Matt and recognizing that risk.
Because, again, remember, that was the end of last book, which was a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she's so in love with him, and more importantly, so dedicated to his success as a human being with mental health needs, that she's like, okay, we can put the relationship talk on the back burner because I need to be close to you more than I need you to realize how close I want to be to you, which is a very mature and self-sacrificing approach. I probably would have just slapped him and been like, you're a bitch.
Well, she's like, fine, I'll settle for being your friend right now, and I'll use that time to get you to recognize your actual feelings and my actual feelings.
Yeah, I'm just impressed with her maturity in this moment. She shuffles her plans really rapidly and efficiently.
She wriggled round on his lap in a way that made him clear his throat and pinned a finger against his chest.
I want tears in your eyes when you say it. I want drool on your chin and a stammer in your voice. I love that line. I love it so much. Drool on your chin. Yeah, they are gonna get kinky once the end of the world is over. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Or maybe before. I don't know. A lot of that happens off screen. Thank you,
Probably
RJ.
before.
Maidens have seen some shit. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And then that goes into one of my favorite lines where, he's like, you just see a mudfoot from the two rivers, and she says, I see you, Rand. I see you. And that's just, that's very romantic.
My heart.
I guess,
Yeah.
That's all he wants. And everyone sees the Dragon Reborn, and he just wants to be seen as himself.
Yeah, and it also echoes nicely the fact that that's the way the Aiel acknowledge you, right? I see you.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
This is beautiful echo coming from someone who doesn't say that ritualistically. She actually means it, but it also means the same thing. Like, I know that you are there. I acknowledge you exist. And for Rand, as a symbol, to be acknowledged as a human being is an incredibly rare experience.
I love that you point out that Aiel parallel too, because I think there's something to it of like, not just that, like, I know you're there, but like, when I see you, I'm seeing you and not like who I expect you to be or what you can do for me or waiting for my turn to speak or, any number of things that when we are looking at someone, we're not really seeing them. And so I think that's really beautiful.
Min has a lot of commonalities with the Aiel. I mean, Cadmansor and Pants, the knife wielding.
Dry humor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they pretty much adopt her like immediately. They're just like, oh, yeah, she's cool.
And she has that wise one confidence, right? Where she's just like, yeah, I deserve to be taken into account in these serious discussions because, duh, I'm qualified. Like, totally unarrogant, but she just assumes that authority, and they respect that.
Well, and, the other thing that isn't picked up enough on her is just how much reading she does and how much research she does. And how she kind of is the brains of the operation behind the last battle.
That is why I
and
love
the
her.
cleansing of Sidene.
Yeah, and the cleansing of Sidene, yeah.
Yeah, she gets by on the power of her brain and her confidence. And it's just amazing.
Oh, Keith, that's funny.
Yeah, the Discord comment. Kinky enough to freak out Matt in the Technicolor visions. Fact.
Yep.
That's canon. That's canon.
That is canon. It's very
Yeah, I
canon.
forgot about that, but yeah.
And I mean, like, Matt is not easily freaked out in that department, I wouldn't think. So
I would not think that.
He's got some experience. I think I always said his freaked out was more about the fact that he's seeing Rand, not
Yeah,
that,
That-
yeah.
fair.
Yeah,
But still.
not necessarily what he's seeing.
It would be weird to like have every time you think about your friend suddenly see them doing whatever they're doing, and
Yeah, it could be the most vanilla thing ever, and it would still be awkward.
It's basically like always having a streaming cam on your friends. And
Yes.
just like having that in your screen, and whenever you think about them, you look over and there's the image of them, whatever they're doing.
Yeah, Truman showing on your friends is like, eh. But the pattern said it was okay.
The pattern promised. I think he's a little overconfident that the Rebel Aes Sedai are on his side and are, like have to come crawling to him.
A little?
They have no other choice.
yeah.
He is so
This
missing the
rem-
mark.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Nile chapters, like where he's concluding and assuming and also like when Matt is in Saladar, like assuming he knows what's going on there, and with the new Amerlin and all of that, and it's just like, nope, you have some of these pieces, but you are putting them together all wrong.
That's a theme in this book, isn't it?
Oh, it very much
People
is,
having
yeah.
very complex conclusions that are just so wrong it hurts.
That to me is the Lord of Chaos right there. It's just the rumors and the knowledge, and like
Yes.
no one can make accurate plans because the whole world is flooded with just rumors and like misinformation and fake news.
Basically.
Gee, I wonder what that's like.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's too bad we can't live in that world with rampant climate change and total lack of information.
On a roller coaster ride towards a final disastrous
Confrontation with
potentially
total evil.
never-ending confrontation. Yeah.
Confrontation with evil. Yeah. Sounds completely unrelatable.
What a fantasy. And we all got sad.
Okay, back to...
Ooh. Then we get the visions where she's telling him about the harm that women who can channel are doing, which we talked about at the beginning.
Right, and this really cool part of their relationship again, where she is able to be completely honest with him about what she sees, and he is able to actually accept that she's not holding out on him.
Yeah.
Which I like that conversation because they both have a lot of baggage coming up to that interaction, with her being, chased around by Aes Sedai and him getting lied to or being told what he wants to hear. And the fact that they can both just trust each other is like a beautiful foundation that their whole friendship and relationship rests on.
Even though she's keeping one or two things from him.
Right.
For good reason, though.
Yeah, but not about the viewings. I think that's important because she's constantly having to field inquiries from people who want more from her than she knows and want to manipulate her into using her abilities for them. And then he's also experiencing similar stuff like already I was talking about, where people aren't seeing him, they're seeing what they think he can do for them.
Everyone else who gets Min's visions goes, oh, I don't want that outcome. How can I change it? Mm-hmm. And she's like, you can't.
Right.
And then they get angry. Where he's like, okay, assuming that outcome, how do I react to it?
Yeah.
And that's the right way to handle that information. It's like, okay, assuming some women who are going to channel are going to hurt me. What do I do? Well,
it's like a weather forecast.
It is.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, you bring a freaking coat. Like, what am I? Arrange for a ride. Like, what can you do?
Don't bitch at the forecaster and say, why are you making it rain?
Right.
No, they're not. They're just letting you know that the rain is going to happen, whether you go out and have a picnic in a park or not.
Yep.
Got Rand and Luce Theron arguing for the definition of who is I.
And we've talked about this before, that whole call coming from inside the house, but no caller ID telling you that kind of situation. He's just misattributing knowledge that's bleeding through from his past life because he won't acknowledge that it's his.
But he's also it's totally Rand here, right? Like, he's completely acting on the impressions he's getting from Luce Theron, because Luce Theron is like, well, I have to do this and I have to do that, and Rand is like, no, I have to do literally exactly the plan that you just made. Like, it's very close to integrated.
But then what I love is he starts thinking about how, oh yeah, Three Aes Sedai can show up. Luce Theron can handle Three Aes Sedai. Mm-hmm. Not me. Mm-hmm. Not I can handle Three Aes Sedai. Luce Theron could handle Three Aes Sedai. So I'm okay bringing... No, like, that to me is very like, whoa.
Yeah.
He's like relying on this personality to be powerful enough to take over in a bad situation. Like,
yeah.
Ooh, scary.
Yeah, it's so close to integration, but not quite.
There's a part of him that acknowledges that these are all parts of him.
Yeah.
He just won't consciously, explicitly own that.
Not mad yet.
But at the same time, I think he's aware that this is how he goes mad. This sentence here. The man wanted Rand's mind and body for his own, thought they were his own. And if he managed to gain control even once, Rand was not certain it would not just be that way. Luce Theron Telamon, walking and speaking, while Rand al'Thor was only a voice in his head.
And that's basically what's happening.
That's how Rand goes insane. Is it just... And that's how you go from going insane slowly to going insane quickly. Is the mad voice in your head just suddenly takes over entirely, 100%.
Yeah, and he's learning how to live with Luce Theron and what the ways of dealing with him are, and creating all these little compromises and corners where Luce Theron lives in his mind. And it's like, dude, you're going insane and you're integrating with your past self. Like, just admit it already.
But I can see where it's so confusing. I mean, like, as someone who was reading these books at this time and making this journey with Rand, it was like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
Like, is there somebody else? Is there really another person? Like, is he really going insane? I don't understand. I need to read.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear, like, you know that he's getting information because, like, a lot of the channeling that he does and things like that is, and, like, the information about some of the Forsaken that slips out of his mouth and into his mind that he has no business knowing. So you know as the reader that that knowledge is real and coming from a legitimate source.
The drawing ability that he just manifests.
Yeah, exactly. So you know that all of that bleed through is legitimate, like information and skills that are coming from not his lived experience in this life. And so it makes it harder as the reader to be sure that the personality isn't also a legitimate bleed through from somewhere else. And so it takes a while and maybe a couple of rereads to really put it together that no, that's his way through the taint of like sequestering that knowledge and like in a way that doesn't threaten his own sense of identity.
And then poor Min watching all of this going on behind Rand's eyes.
Yeah. She thinks he's mad at her.
Yeah.
Because, you know, she doesn't know about that stuff.
Right. She thinks that he's suspicious of her because she came with the eyes to die, and she has to, like, assuage all this anxiety around that. And it's like he virtually forgot she was there for a moment.
Like with the break it scene where other people are just like...
Yeah. Break it, break it, break it, break it. Yeah.
So let's talk about Sulin a little bit. One of my honestly least favorite subplots.
Really?
Not so much that it's in there, but I'm like, okay, that's cute. Now give me back the Sulin that I like. Right? Like,
yes.
It's not that I dislike the plot. I just like, I don't like that she's lowering herself for such a long time.
I thought it was interesting that the paragraph about figuring out how to let her meet her toe, because this part, like, it sounded like he's doing the same thing that the wise ones do when they think someone's being too prideful with their toe, or to push an apprentice into recognizing that they are actually a wise one. He's like, okay, fine. I'm going to make you do the most humiliating, useless crap that you don't really need to do. It's not helping anyone to have you being a servant. In fact, it kind of sucks because you're not good at this. But it's to push her to the point of getting over it faster.
Yeah, I always really admired his handling of that because of that way that it's just like, Sulin, this is wrong. Stop it now.
I also want to take Sulin and just be like, stop it. You're wasting your talents and your time, and like it was such a minor offense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, do it for a day or two or even a week, but this like months long charade is really becoming, you know, and she only gives it up because he gets kidnapped, right? And she has to she's like, okay, this is she finally admits what the rest of us have been screaming in our heads the whole time, that this is ridiculous and she needs to be back in Kadansor.
I think it's a way for Robert Jordan to really drive home the fact that these women are warriors and there is no more appropriate place for them in the society. It's not a matter of, oh, Sulin could just as easily have been a farmer if only she hadn't been raised as a warrior. No, she is as much a warrior as any warrior has ever been, and you will feel the skin-crawling revulsion to her trying to be what she is not. I feel like it drives home the spirit of the Aiel a bit more.
I just found this handling of it like surprisingly culturally sensitive of Rand, because it is probably how a wise one would also have done it.
I'm nodding. Yeah.
And also, like, she's only doing it for months because her pride is she's overly prideful with it. And I bet the wise ones are like pissed about, oh my God, this girl.
All the
she's
former
so
maidens
prideful.
are just like head desking.
Just like, oh God, this is so embarrassing.
When I picture it, I picture the football player in a tutu trying to learn dance for the first time, like ballet dance for the first time, because that was a trope for a while where they were like, oh, ballet will help you learn balance, so we're going to put football players on ballet floors. Have you seen those dance movies? Back me up. No.
I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, though, right?
I do. Yeah. But dance does help you with balance.
Totally.
But
Yeah, no, I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that was a whole thing in movies where it was like an excuse to put the jocks in with the cute girl.
Yeah.
And like get them to dance together for the first time. And that's just anyway, I picture Sulin like as the jock, like in the maid's outfit, just like trying to do the job, but it's like she's got these big muscular arms, and I imagine it's just like too tight around her arms.
Right,
and,
her
like,
stride is probably
shoulders.
Terrible for carrying tall piles of things.
Totally. She's just like she's like swaying back and forth with her stride, you know, instead of like.
And that's part of like how you as the audience see that she is exceeding Aiel like custom with her pride is when she actually is starting to get good at curtsying and all of that stuff. Is it's like, Sulin, you're starting to get institutionalized. Like, stop, snap out of it. It's not funny anymore because you're getting good at it.
Yeah. That's just become sad.
Yeah, exactly. It's like even the wetlanders are looking at you weird at this point. Come on. Like they don't realize you're in a heel. That's how well you have overdone this joke. Which obviously hasn't happened yet because she's still super awkward. But like by the time the Dumais Wells happens, she doesn't look Aiel because she's got her costume on too well.
Yeah. And she's an older woman and she has white hair, so that everyone thinks she's even older than she actually is.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think Dobrain is like, what is this old woman doing in here, being all hysterical? And they're like, you do not recognize her.
She can peel your skin off with her teeth, actually.
Right. She's probably the most dangerous person in this room right now, so be careful what you say.
I like what Keith is saying in the Discord, that this is on theme with Min's journey in this chapter. I agree with that. Women forcing themselves into roles they think they need to take for whatever reason, but that discomfort with the change of clothes and the need to like conform to something, which arguably in this case it's both Rand and it's a little bit bleh for that, but they both do have very...
Although I appreciate that Min doesn't.
They're both struggling with the gender norms, right? That Min clearly doesn't fit her gender norm, right? She's called the tomboy and not the Esmeralda figure that she, probably should be, according to her aunts. And then at the same time, you have Sulin, who's this warrior and definitely doesn't fit into the feminine, maid, sexy maid costume, right? Like, Sulin with a feather duster is not
and the
really...
Scars.
The scars.
And the scars. Those don't really go together all that well, so... No, I've been, it's a fun mental image. I get so frustrated after, like, the 5th or 6th or 7th time she, like, walks. And maybe it's just exaggerated in my head. It might be one of those things that, like... Because
yes.
it's so effectively written that, like, I oversize it in my head for how annoying it is.
Yeah, you are definitely overemphasizing it, because we're at page 749, and Dumais Wells starts at page 960. So we actually only have like 200 pages in which for this to happen.
I thought it was like 2 books.
Same, honestly.
I swear to God, yeah.
But nope.
Nope, I guess not. Jordan is just the master of messing with timelines and stuff like that. Making these little scenes feel just huge and important and outsized for the character.
Well, I mean, to Sulin, this is a life-defining embarrassment.
Absolutely, yeah, totally.
Yeah, but she's clearly taking it way too far, even within the standards of her own culture. She's kind of the epitome of what the wise ones talk about how some maidens like take their pride way too far.
Yeah, maidens and stone dogs. It's just ridiculous.
Yes.
While giving Avienda a side eye.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, Sulin comes in and throws a bunch of shade at Min because Avienda and Rand is like, I'm just gonna sort of grope at Min to prove that I'm not into Avienda anymore. Because that makes sense. And Min's like, I'm gonna just randomly take a nap in the middle of all this, because that is logical.
Oh, falling asleep on a boy's chest is cute.
It's cute, but it's also random.
He also acknowledges, like, she got in really late, like, she's exhausted, and plus, I think it's a whole part of how, a big part of their relationship and what they like about each other is how comfortable they are with each other and how relaxed and unguarded they are. Like, I don't know about you guys, but, like, I have a very hard time falling asleep except in very specific circumstances. Like, I can't fall asleep usually around other people, and I can't fall asleep, like, on the couch watching TV, or if anything is playing that has words, I can't do it. And it's about not being able to relax and feel comfortable. And it's the same, I think, here. She's so comfortable with Rand, and she can feel at ease, and like there's no expectations on her, that she can actually let her guard down and fall asleep. She trusts him to protect her and not do anything that would hurt her.
And that's her guard truly is down, right? She lets a viewing slip. Like, she's usually so careful to never let her viewing slip out.
Yeah. And so I think it's kind of beautiful. It's like a 4-year-old who trusts you falling asleep on your lap.
It's very cute. I just think it's weird that she goes from helping Rand, like, get under Sulin's skin to Melaine walking in, and she's just passing out, like, right in that transition. It feels very, like, rapid fire series of events. And I've fallen asleep in some weird situations, like as an orchestra was tuning to start up a concert, like, but I don't know. I've always thought it was weird how she's like, Sulin dropped a tray, and now Rand is trying to make it obvious that he's into me, and now this other woman just walked in, and I'm going to take a nap. Like, it's cute, but I just don't get the sequence of events.
I can see the issue. I can just also kind of give it a pass with the other, like, context of their relationship and her having been traveling all night.
And there's also not specifically, I'm reading these sentences, and Sulin leaves, and then Melaine walks in, but there's time. There's not, he doesn't say there's time in between those two, but there could be.
That's
right?
fair.
There's no reason why one has to walk in on the heels of the other. There could be time where they're just, because he's thinking about an island, Samara, and how they treat him like a little kid, and like he doesn't want anyone else to know that.
Yeah, that's fair. There could be some 15 minutes of just comfortable silence.
There's nothing defined in there, but if you're reading it as Melaine comes in immediately after Sulin leaves, then sure, it might be a little weird because it's not a lot of time. But if there is some time, which I kind of interpret that as them kind of hanging out for a bit, and then Melaine comes in, then sure, maybe she's like, now it's downtime and I'm really tired and okay, nap time.
All right. I will establish that headcanon because it makes the scene work a lot better for me. That is definitely a nice, timeless cuddle space, for sure.
I mean, who among us has not been in that, like, weird, settled position with somebody?
Right, it's like, don't move, because then you have to have a conversation about that. Just keep holding still.
Then you have to acknowledge that you're touching and you're moving because the touching is awkward, and you, like, keep touching for, like, an hour.
Yeah, I think we've all sat in that tension before.
Yeah.
What do you think would actually prevent one of the maidens from walking in?
I was going to ask that too.
Ooh, I wrote some notes about that, actually. I have a theory. I think it's intimacy, like interpersonal intimacy, not necessarily sex, but that would probably count. But like if you were brushing or washing someone's hair or having an obviously private conversation, because the Aiel aren't big on PDA.
Yeah.
But any functional activity, totally fine to be observed by others.
Like bathing or...
Yeah, like bathing, getting dressed, shaving, whatever, like someone's going to come in. But if you're dancing like life pleases you, or you're washing someone's hair or brushing their hair, like they might be like, oh, okay, I should probably wait for a better time.
I agree with that because we get that conversation later between Elaine and Avienda about how treasured those moments of like brushing hair and being together are for developing their first sister relationship. So I agree. I think that it could be something as, quote, innocent by Two Rivers standards as brushing someone else's hair, but that would be way too intimate for an Aiel to intrude on. Unless it was like, there's an attack happening and it's a big deal.
And I don't even think it has to be romantic or like if you were brushing your daughter's hair.
Right.
Like, I think that would, it's like, this is a bonding moment. Like I think bonding moments are private among the Aiel, but other stuff is not a big deal.
But yeah, being naked, like, no, that's not the same thing.
And I think there's a certain level of physical intimacy that would also prevent them from walking in.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. If they were actually banging, I don't think that Melaine would have come in.
Yeah. Well, I think that comes under the heading of potential interpersonal intimacy as well.
Right, because that is an intimate moment. It's just not the only definition of an intimate moment.
Right, exactly. I think the Aiel definition of intimate is a lot broader than that, and also narrower in certain ways, Unless it's like part of a game like Maiden's Kiss. Like I think if someone was playing Maiden's Kiss, Melaine would probably come right in.
Oh, right.
Like, there's
right.
nothing.
Well, that's not
there's
intimate.
nothing intimate.
Yeah,
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like there's nothing intimate about that, so context matters.
Yeah. She'd probably grab a spear and be like, all right,
yeah,
boys.
just get in line.
Or like if you were pinning your own hair up, like whatever, I'm going to come in. But if you're having a tender moment.
Right. If
that's
you're
different.
reading a book, not a big deal. If you're reading a book to your child, probably don't invade. So Melaine, she comes in with news that she's not sure which piece of news is more important, though we quickly learn, along with Rand, that the pieces of news are close to the same thing.
That Min just brought.
Right, because, yeah, there's the whole Saladar thing, which nobody realizes that Rand just knows where Saladar is, so everyone's, like, splitting the news up and, like, parsing it out to, like, obfuscate Saladar, and then Rand's like, yeah, I know. Just elephant in the room, Saladar in the room, I know.
He got that knowledge from being in the stone, right? And spying until around reality.
Right.
And he's just like, he's a little confident about that. He's showing it off a little bit.
But he is remarkably good at not flapping his lips about it, and so he learns a whole lot. Yeah, so Melaine comes in saying, Egwene has gone from the tents, and she's going to Saladar, where there are eyes to die, and I haven't told you about this until now, but now I'm allowed to tell you that they are the absolute worst.
Yeah. And that's all about those lessons in Teleron Round.
Yeah, those have been disasters.
Once Egwene was no longer a part of them, it was just a whole pain in the ass.
What was her specific description? Froward, undisciplined, contentious, and full of themselves beyond reason.
I mean, she's not wrong.
Tell us how you really feel, Melaine.
At the same time, couldn't that also kind of...
Like, word for word?
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, that's not true. Undisciplined and contentious are not super ideal attributes. They're very disciplined.
That's true. Those are the two.
But full of themselves beyond reason, oh yeah. Pottle, wow. Pot, kettle.
Yes.
You know what? That's just a phrase now. Oh, Pottle, you're a Pottle.
Not to be confused with a pothole.
Driving over one will ruin your suspension. Driving the other is just a civic duty.
And then we have the viewing of Melaine's twins, which is a sweet little sex-based plot, as we discussed at the beginning.
Yeah, just sort of one of those little things that helps her get in and helps her bond, and you know, it's the thing she needed to give her secret up, right? Because then, basically, in order to explain that, she had to give details, and then that gave her sort of equal status to one of the wise ones.
And why do you two think that she just sort of casually sleep mumbled a viewing at Melaine?
I mean, I think it's part of that, you know, what we were talking about before. Her guard is totally down with Rand. And I think part of it might be Taviran twisting that happens.
Same. Because
he needs her to be in with the Wise Ones.
Yeah, Min and the Wise Ones is an incredibly potent alliance that helps keep things together around Darth Rand. And yeah, it wouldn't have happened without this conversation, right? So yeah, I vote to...
And also, it's such an innocent viewing, right? Who's not going to be pleased to know they're going to have twins? Well, don't answer that. A lot of people.
It happens in this case that the character is very excited. So
very excited, yes, yeah. And it's a very happy message for her. And I think Min is sort of, it's like being like, oh, you're going to win the lotto, or you're going to have a good day, or, you know, it's like, oh, you know, that's exciting.
But she doesn't know Melaine. She has no context to know that this is such welcome news. It's very Taviran-y.
Although I have to wonder if maybe that was on.
Maybe. I mean, I would assume that the viewing carried a lot of positive overtones. And we know Melaine survives the last battle, so presumably these are children that get to help build the world after and are probably a really powerful force, one of them at least, for helping the Aiel negotiate the opening of the Fourth Age.
Yeah, probably born at the same time as Avienda's babies. Avienda has babies.
And not that far off.
I mean, within a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'd grow up together.
Yeah, they'd be like classmates and age mates in that generational sense, for sure. And they're going to be named Min and Egwene, which we don't actually get that Egwene is going to be the name of the second one. I think we don't get either of their names for a long time. It's very scattered throughout the rest of the books. But we do know eventually that the twins are going to be named Min and Egwene.
Well, you learn in this chapter...
Well, she says she'll name Min.
Oh, yeah. Egwene doesn't get the news until she tries to meet her toe with Melaine, like, months later. Because Melaine is, like, pretty close to ready to pop by the last battle.
Yeah.
There's a line where it's actually coming up pretty soon, where Egwene tries to make up her toe, and she says she's so delighted that she just found out.
That's in this book?
She announced it's in this book. Not only was she not going to claim her toe, but she was also going to name one of the children after Egwene.
Wow, I totally thought that was in like 3 books.
No, that's because she's so happy that she just learned it that she dismissed. She's like, whatever, I'm on cloud 9.
Oh right, yeah. I liked that. I thought that was so cute.
I didn't realize that. I think I'd forgotten that Melaine didn't know when Egwene told like Amis and everyone right before she left.
Yeah, she wasn't there.
Yeah, I forget why.
I forgot that she wasn't there.
She must have just been like with Bale or something.
Honeymooning.
She's with Rand and Camelin.
Oh. Right.
Yes, duh.
Duh! Wow.
Wow,
Thank you,
okay.
Seth.
If it was a snake, it would have bit me.
Yeah, when you have virtual reality as well as like traveling and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, seriously, you have VR and instant teleportation. That's just not freaking fair, man.
So cool. Yeah, totally unfair.
Keep track of where all the minor characters, especially because now minor characters can just like hop a ride, and just like they can teleport too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like this. Except that her hair was already curled. How did women do that anyway?
Do that anyway. It's so cute. It's like, oh, Rand, are you getting distracted by
adorable.
the cute girl's curly hair? Aww.
Also, I'm asking.
I have no idea.
What, get your hair to curl? Like, Seth, are you legit asking?
Only for comedic sake.
Okay. I was gonna say, there are a lot of
Yeah,
products.
my hair is straight as a board. I have zero concept how the curls are a thing.
Oh, man. Well, I have naturally curly hair.
Ah.
And in terms of the difference between naturally curly and straight hair, it's disulfide bridges in the structure of the strand.
Then how does heat work to how curlers?
Well, with the disulfide bridges, it breaks them, but they can come back. It's like a whole thing. But curlers, yeah, it's the heat. So
The best curls I ever got was just from like wet braiding my hair and then leaving it like that for a day. But like it lasts all of 15 minutes when I take the braids out. So
Is Min naturally curly or naturally straight?
naturally straight.
really?
I think so, because her hair is straight up until she ends up curling it to be Elmendreda. And like Laris teaches her how to curl her hair in that period of time. So, and trust me, if your hair is naturally curly, no one teaches you how to do that. But it is a learning process to learn how to work with it so it doesn't look terrible. But that's a whole different thing.
It would definitely fit with Min to have perfect curls at this point in her journey with respect to beauty products and Rand.
Yeah, between Laris and Leanne, like, she can figure it out.
Yeah. And trying to make a good impression on Rand. Like,
And then here you get the line shortly after she's talking to Mullane, gives the full explanation, and Mullane says it's like interpreting the dream without dreaming, and that's sort of what gives, I think, Min this status of a dreamwalker, wise one on that level.
because she has to see and interpret at the same scale as them.
Well, and the Aiel clearly kind of tap people with those kinds of potentials to be wise ones. Like, if you can channel, you're gonna have to go to Rodian. If you are a dreamwalker, you're gonna have to go to Rodian to have a wise one. And if you're just exceptionally good of judgment, they're gonna want you for that. And I think they're seeing this a similar way. Like, if you'd been born in the Waste, we would have made you a wise one.
Yeah. Agreed.
It's interesting, Min is one of those few people where we see how her life would have gone in all the different cultures. Like, she's kind of ostracized and treated like a witch in this culture. In Shangchang culture, she's elevated and treated like a prophet and a person of power. In Aiel society, she would have been given, a leadership role and a responsibility and decision. It's just very interesting to see, and she gets to experience sort of all of those different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just being an advisor to one of the most powerful people in the world.
Several of the most powerful people.
Exactly. Because she ends up being an advisor to both Rand and Tuon. Both the North and the South, and at the West and the East.
And she advises a lot of different individualized Sedai, both rogue freelancers and more organized ones.
I like this bit when they're talking about birth, and like they're talking about how men always faint, and Rand is thinking about like all of the birthings he assisted with.
I love
And
that.
just like, it highlights how they're making all these assumptions, like these broad sweeping generalizations, and kind of forgetting that he had a life before all of this where he was on a farm. Like, it reminds me of that scene with Egwene and that white sister who asks her if she knows what culling is.
Yeah.
And Egwene is like, yeah, I do. Come on. From a farming community. Condescending.
Yeah, I think that's actually Elaine is the one that delivers that line. And Egwene's like, yeah.
Oh, it might be. I think somebody is reporting about like the theories about why channeling is lowering in the population, and it's like some of the whites think that you're culling it out of the population. You know what that is.
And Egwene's just like,
oh,
do you
my God.
understand how farms work?
Yeah. That like rich splaining.
Yeah, totally. I love that despite how much men are from Mars, women are from Venus, we get in this series, Rand is like incredibly okay with the concept that like mammals have uteruses and give birth.
Mm-hmm.
Before I faint, mind if we bring it back to the conversation we were having?
Yeah, let's talk about something relevant,
Like,
please.
he's not actually uncomfortable. He's just irritated, and I adore that for him.
Yeah, and he's irritated because they're sweeping him into this generalization about men not handling births. He's like, I handled lots of births. Let's move on, please.
I've never actually made someone pregnant, but I've definitely helped animals give birth. So, like, I kind of know what's what.
It also puts a sort of a class difference between like these sort of smart but kind of incompetent leaders that are upper class and maybe don't really, have to learn, in books about things like
Culling.
culling, thank you, and, haven't, birthing is this, secretive thing done. A lot of noble women in the past, like, birthing was done in a secret chamber and no one ever, you weren't allowed to, like, scream and shit like that. Like, it was bad.
Right. Confinement.
And, like...
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. Your period of confinement.
Mm-hmm. And that sort of, like, setting up that class difference. Whereas, like, in lower class, we ain't got time for that shit. Get back to work.
Right?
We're getting elbows deep in there.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
It sets up Rand and Egwene as better able to handle some of the challenges of the changing world than some of these upper-class privileged folks who have been in charge.
The Aiel obviously aren't really factored into that classist thing, but there's a lot of layers being poked fun at here. It works.
Yeah.
I also think that the next thing I have is that Min understands how her actions with respect to lying on Rand's behalf to the Aes Sedai might look traitorous to the Aiel, and she immediately rushes to explain it in a way that expresses that she totally gets Ji-Ito, even though she doesn't know what it's called. She gets the Aiel honor code.
Yeah, much like Egwene, she has this internal understanding of obligation and what is and isn't right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like Melaine doesn't think of Min as a traitor. She actually thinks even better of Min because Min gives her this explanation about, like, oh no, I'm not betraying anything. I'm just being uber true to Rand, even if it means looking a little bit sketch to the Aes Sedai.
Like, I have a hierarchy of loyalties, and
precisely.
This is the one at the top. Yeah.
And also braving Aes Sedai, like that, that's tough. That's not just any, spying. That's dealing with, powerful enemies with serious consequences.
Yeah, she's no shrinking violet.
And Melaine, they get in a bit of an argument. Melaine is convinced the Aes Sedai mean Rand harm, whether they, express it or not. And Min is basically saying, no, I think, even though some of them might have reasons not to like you, they all are important enough that they are here to help you. And I would have seen something in all the visual of them hurting.
Meanwhile, Melane's just like, only Egwene Helvira has honor. All the rest of them can go fuck off.
Yeah, like, unless I see otherwise, I'm just assuming they're all trash.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that had to do with the beating, but then I realized it wasn't there for the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just Egwene being...
But I mean, there was the whole, like, running 50 times around the camp, and, like...
Yeah, just ages of being...
Yeah. Egwene... The paying of her toe at the end was, like, her masterwork on proving that she understood, right? She had months of the entire lifestyle to impress people like Melaine.
But they look at each other and go, see, I told you she'd understand. Like, they're like, yeah, she knows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just like all the other Aes Sedai can just take a number, file up to the left, and no. But, Min is like, I know these women as individuals. Even though I don't trust them, I also trust what they are not definitely planning on doing. And they have an argument that represents that they both respect each other's opinions, I think. And Rand is smart enough to just sit there and take notes.
It reminds me of when they describe the wise ones, the way they sort of vie for authority. Like, it's different than Sulin and Nandira, but it's like the same thing, where they sit and they have tea and they have a conversation, and eventually one of them is leader.
Oh, like Sorelia and Cadsuane, but with less poison.
Yeah, and like Sorelia and Ames.
Yeah, no, you're right. This is very much like that. It's a meeting of the minds as far as the various camps of wise ones go.
Right, and when they come away from that conversation, like, they come to this conversation, they talk it out because they're on opposite sides of an argument, or like they have different points to convey. But they go away from it, as you say, with that mutual respect.
And I looked up every single one. I looked up all the Aes Sedai. They're all fine. They're all fine.
Me too. That's what I was saying. Like, it's so weird that they get 9 and no black, because that's, like, just statistically very improbable. I also was amused that every single one of them, the justifications had to do, well, not all of them, but most of them, the justifications of why they did or didn't like Rand were seated in their like place of origin, even though they were supposed to have renounced all those allegiances. I mean, a couple, it is more their Aja allegiance, like Demira, who's like, oh, well, he started school, so, you know, that's pretty awesome. But everyone else pretty much is like, well, based on the value system I learned and the authority I respect, I do or do not trust this guy.
Yeah, it's interesting how much they're like, Aes Sedai set aside their allegiances, except for literally every single Aes Sedai doesn't set aside.
Yes, except for all of them who definitely don't do that.
Egwene might be the actual exception to that.
Yeah.
Assuming a spherical Aes Sedai.
In a vacuum.
Massless, dimensionless, on a frictionless surface.
The ideal Aes Sedai. It's like an ideal gas. They just don't exist.
Yeah. Take out air resistance. Take out Rand resistance.
Right.
Under extremely controlled experimental conditions.
Yes.
But they you know, Aes Sedai, I think part of their fundamental flaw is they think they can control that. They think they can just this platonic ideal of an Aes Sedai, and because they don't acknowledge their flaws, they are vulnerable to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably like the
They're
entire...
so arrogant in that way.
That's like the entire lesson of Aes Sedai hubris right there.
And I can see why they think that, or like why they think they should have been that way, given that once upon a time they lived for like 8 to 1,000 years or something, when like at this point they lived to 400, and you feel like you should be able to get beyond all of those mundane concerns or whatever, but they really can't.
No, people are people. It's just an inescapable attribute of being a people, is you continue to be a people.
I just have a clip of Depeche Mode in there.
Well, I think one of the things that makes Codswain so great is that she's like, yeah, I am who I am, and like I have my biases, and I work with them, and I acknowledge them, and they make me more powerful.
Yeah.
Or at least being aware of them does, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
she owns who she is instead of spending half her energy on trying to suppress it.
Or pretending that she doesn't have those biases.
Right.
You know, accepting your biases and moving forward with that frees up a lot of spoons for other, more important thought processes.
Well, if you never acknowledge that you have those biases, you can't work on not letting them bias you,
Right.
basically. Like, if you don't know, it's that whole first step's admitting you have a problem. It's not the only step, but you aren't getting anywhere until you do that part.
Absolutely.
Because what's there to fix if you don't even see the problem?
And to me, that's the one thing about, quote unquote, some people laugh at me at that, but like, I feel like knowing who I am and being like, okay, I don't have to speculate anymore about my personality or my desires or, you know, am I going to enjoy this? You know, like, I pretty much know ahead of time, and I'm secure in that knowledge. I know whether or not I'm going to be good at something. I know what my strengths are. I know, not that I can't change them, you know, they're not locked in stone, but like, I'm confident in that. And if someone's like, hey, can you do this? I can pretty much give them a definitive answer and be like, yes or no. And I feel like that is a big part of growing up and like being an adult, is, you know, being like, here are my abilities. This is my ability set. I can very cleanly, and I can very confidently tell you whether or not I have the ability to set whatever.
Ability and inclination, too. Like, yeah, just because I can doesn't mean I will or want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that yeah, this is something I do not want to, and I'm going to let you know that right up front. Like, you can ask me, and I might be good at it, but no, I don't want it unless X, Y, and Z. And there's a certain amount of like confidence that's very, when people are like, how do you know you're grown up? It's like that to me is how you
Yeah.
when you know what you love and why.
Yeah, you're not necessarily looking for external validation for every single choice you make.
Or for any of your choices. Which can lead to feedback
Oh,
problems,
yeah.
don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, yeah.
Growing up is it's a double-edged sword.
I think that about like brain chemistry stuff, the way that like as children our brains can just soak up information, but in order to operate in the world they kind of have to calcify a little bit and like establish patterns, and that makes them less good at learning new things. And there's this trade-off, but like you kind of have to stop letting your explore the possibilities, or else you're gonna have issues with object, you know.
I mean,
like,
speaking from experience, yes.
Before we get too far off the subject of Aes Sedai, in looking them all up, yeah, none of them are Black Aja. But I did notice that Demira Arif, the Brown, her warder's name is Steven.
Steve?
Which
Did we find
yes,
Steve?
Exactly. We might have found Steve. She's also the one who gets stabbed by the fake Aiel later.
Yes.
So. But yeah, I just thought that was funny and might be of interest.
I'm putting that in the show notes.
We found him!
We found Steve. Congratulations, everybody. We can go home.
Yep.
Mission.
Turns out Damara is a much more important character than we thought.
Yeah.
They said they were making changes,
Apparently Damara.
Yeah, they've cut Varen and replaced her with Damara.
Yes.
Fuck your yellow.
Yes. Did you just Google some random yellow sister? Oh, Rafe.
Can't be healed
The
by chin
sass.
smell.
The sass, Rafe. Next thing I have is how he finds a compromise expecting to get smiles from both women and gets frowns from both for his clever compromise.
Yes.
Because obviously that's the best compromise, is where nobody is happy.
When they're compromising, what they didn't want was to win their side. They wanted the other person to lose. And so by giving both of them what they want, he's essentially even neither of them. Does that make sense?
I don't know. I kind of wonder if it's them responding to his obvious pandering. Like, they're trying to make their case, and then he's kind of pandering at them with trying to split the difference. And they're just like, okay, what you're saying together is totally meaningless.
Yeah, I could actually see that being maybe more of it. Like, they're both like, I'm right. Agree with me. Don't split the difference so that I'm not mad at you. That's not actually the conclusion I wanted you to get from this.
Like, all you're telling me is that you don't want me to be mad.
Right. But I also feel like he is taking away the highlights of both of their advice, and it is a reasonable conclusion with the information he has. Obviously, he ends up totally shooting himself in the foot with this attitude, but I think at this point, he's genuinely not trolling them. He actually means it and is trying to be, like, a useful listening dragon.
Yeah, he's like, I will respect them as I should, because their eyes said I, but I don't trust them, and I'm not going to until they show. That totally is the right way to approach it.
I agree that Rand is probably being genuine, but I can see them having the takeaway of like, okay, I don't think that you're really hearing me. I think you're just saying what I want to hear. Yeah, the last sentence I had highlighted, like, just which felt awkward for some reason, and it's just like, yeah, because a part of you realizes you're into her, but you think she thinks of you as a friend who's fun to tease. It's just those communication issues for the whole thing.
Which leads right into the next chapter, just being like, awkward.
Yep. And now it's weird.
Yeah. I actually wonder if the cut in that chapter was, like, deliberately, like, oh, he's like, this is kind of an awkward spot to cut it. I'm just gonna, which felt awkward for some reason. And then, like, if he's, like, commenting on the chapter cut a little bit as much as the relationship.
The art imitated life, imitated the art all at once.
Yeah, totally. Because it does feel very awkward. You're like, wait, which felt awkward for some reason. Next chapter. Like, that's a like, satisfying ending to a chapter in the slightest. That I think is a very clever way to end the chapter on a cliffhanger and in an awkward way.
And acknowledging that the whole chapter is setting up this super, as you say, like, the cringe part of this relationship, like that, as Aradia was talking about earlier.
So much awkward. It's appropriate that this puppy love, happiness, awkwardness, like, ends on a slightly sour, off, flat note right at the end, because that is what the early parts of relationships usually end up resolving into, is an intense awkwardness.
Yeah, this is the point where, like, you've gone out with a friend and you were pretty sure you were going out as friends, but then it felt like a date, like, in a lot of ways, and then you're leaving for the night and you're not sure how to end the evening because you're not sure if it's a friend hanging out thing or a first date that you didn't really plan on being on.
Totally.
And so now it feels awkward for some reason.
So yeah, I was gonna read us out, but I don't think that's really appropriate.
That wouldn't be awkward enough.
You can.
No, I think I'm just gonna end it right here because it feels really fucking awkward to end it on that.
Okay, turning off recording.
dishes in the background are surprisingly really annoying.
Yeah.
The sharp clicking. Anything that clicks with that really high attack is not great.
When we first started Unramblings, it was winter, and so we were in that, like, you always want a hot beverage season, and there was a string of recordings where we had forgotten, and we had tea that had, like, spoons in them, and we had to institute a rule, like, no spoons anywhere near the podcast. Just no. It's not allowed. It was horrible.
Yeah, I got a quiet keyboard, so I can type occasionally without, like, killing the mic.
I'm gonna be back just a sec.
This is what happens when you turn on recording. Everybody's like, oh shit, I forgot. Let me go get something. The quickest way to remember something you forgot, turn on recording.
Yeah, that's how you remember to turn off your air conditioning. We have this bubbling cat water thing. We just decided to put it on a switch so we can turn it off more easily.
Right. No, that makes sense.
That reminds me, I'm going to double check that we're on eco mode for the house because I don't want our heat to turn on.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?